gentlemen. Welcome to the Paddle Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional paddle, presented by Hugo and Gons. We're on to episode 92, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Hugo here today. Hugo, it's great to have you on. How you doing?
I've been better gone, to be honest, as we were just discussing. For all our listeners to know, I'm currently on holiday in Mexico, and the last few days have been a bit chaotic. Well, yeah, 30-degree heat and no air conditioning in the hotel. Yeah, my partner's got a fever, so yeah, just a bit of a shit show to put it simply. But hopefully it'll improve soon. And yeah, just looking forward to chatting about paddle for a bit because obviously we had a massive tournament this week and got to be discussed, right?
Yeah,
So we thought we had to address our listeners and followers.
yeah. I think this is the most international podcast we've ever done, right? I mean, we're like, is it 8 hour difference or something like that?
Yeah, 8 hours.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, Hugo, his conditions, as you heard, for everyone out there, they're not the greatest. And even for myself, so I'm not in Madrid, which is where I live. I'm in the north of Spain with kind of my parents and my girlfriend, and I didn't bring my whole setup as well because I got confused for when the final was going to be. I thought it was actually going to be today, Sunday, so I thought that we would record Monday when I would be back home. So I mean, I do apologize for kind of maybe if the audio or the image isn't as high quality as it normally is, but we thought it'd still be good to get an episode out. I mean, we actually received a comment, if I'm not mistaken, today, one of our fans kind of asking us in our latest video, where are you guys? Are you guys okay? You haven't posted there hasn't been an episode in 12 days. So I'm sure everyone as well out there is kind of excited to hear what we got to say about the Qatar Major, obviously one of the bigger tournaments this season. So we definitely had to get an episode out, even though the quality might not, in terms of image and sound, might not be the best that it or a level at the level that it normally is. But I'm sure content wise, it will be as always.
No, exactly. I mean, just to reiterate, obviously conditions aren't great. We don't have our standard equipment, at least most of it, but we wanted to address our fans because obviously it's a major tournament and it's as if, well, say compare it to a tennis calendar, Wimbledon's just happened and you don't jump on and have a chat. It makes no sense. So obviously we had to address our fans and we also wanted to have a chat, to be honest, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the tournament itself gave kind of a lot of talking points, but yeah, do leave a like for us out there for kind of the effort of pulling this episode together. And next week we'll be back to normal and everything will be great as usual. Maybe moving on and starting with the episode, going to discuss the Qatar Major, obviously which just happened. I mean, another bit of a chaotic tournament, I would say. I mean, again, the outdoor conditions taking a bit of the kind of protagonism of the whole tournament. I mean, I remember actually watching one day one of the grandstand courts, and the camera itself was like shaking and moving, and the microphone you could hear wind sounds, which was like, I mean, I literally switched it on for like 5 minutes and then just turned it off because it was unbearable. Like you couldn't just watch it. So obviously, again, outdoor conditions making an impact, but nonetheless, the tournament was a good one. I mean, again, we had the first time actually that the Classico, I guess, of the last year happened in 2025. So we saw Chingalan and COELLO Tapia in the final, but as recent, well, I guess as the recent performances have shown, COELLO Tapia still dominated, and they won with authority, I would say. Maybe the score doesn't suggest as such. Certainly through the beginning of the match, you thought it would have been a more equal affair, but then I think towards the end, I mean, it was very clear that Goya and Tapia were just a level above, and they ended up winning the final in the major 7-6, 6-2, also kind of ending their quote unquote drought of trophies and kind of the bad streak that they've had. But we have learned that Tapia was actually injured as kind of we feared, and kind of a severe injury as well through the beginning of the season. And now he was back at 100%. He did mention in the press conference, and that showed in his game. But maybe Hugo, I'll leave it up to you to kick off kind of your thoughts on the tournament and the final itself.
I mean, on the tournament, I think, well, just to reiterate your point about the conditions, again, hugely problematic. I mean, there were points where you had the ball under the net and the net would just float upwards and the ball would go onto the court whilst players were playing, which obviously completely ruins the whole point of it. So I mean, I'd say at the very least, make your majors indoor. They are the most important tournaments. And if Premier Padel want to be anything like, well, tennis generally, but I know they don't want to be the same thing, same product, but they want to have some sort of similarity in terms of calendar, structure, professionality or professionalism. Why wouldn't you secure the majors in indoor conditions so that just everything goes smoothly? At the end of the day, it's a Grand Slam, right? So, or the equivalent of Grand Slam. So it should be prioritized as such. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the final, I always felt COELLO Tapia were on top. I know that Chingalan clawed their way back into the game, but I felt that that was more kind of knit and grit from them and a few mistakes from actually I'd say Tapia mainly, who smashed towards the start of the match wasn't that efficient. I think it was more due to that than actually Chingalan playing very well. So, I mean, as you said, I think the final result was 7-6, 6-2. Who knows what would have happened if that tiebreak, which was actually very, very even until the end. And I don't know whether you remember that point where Tapia, there was a high lob from Chingo in the tiebreak. Tapia tries to play a half volley because the ball's going to bounce right at the end of the court. He misses the ball, but Goyo comes in, plays the shot, and they win the point, and then they get two set points after that. Who knows what would have happened if that point had gone Chingalan's way? You never know. But I just do think that Goyan Tapia looked more solid. And when it really mattered, it felt like their decision making was better. I saw signs on behalf of Galán, signs of kind of a bit of frustration and also trying to close points too quickly. So quite similar to what was happening to them towards the end of last season when they started struggling against Goya and Tapia and when they started kind of that losing streak against them, particularly in the finals. And then from Chingotto, I felt that he looked like he wasn't as good as the other three players on the court. Now, let's take that comment with a pinch of salt. He clearly is. That's why he's battling for the number one spot next to Galán against Goyan Tapia. But it just felt that it was kind of that slightly older version Chingotto where his Bibara or his Bandeja weren't being as dangerous. He wasn't being as dominant uptight at the net, which is obviously his biggest strong point. And actually, from an unforced error perspective, I thought he made a few more than he's kind of used to or what he normally does. So I'd say those are my main thoughts, Gons. I don't know whether you agree with them.
I 100% agree with them, and kind of hearing you speak and also thinking about it myself, it just feels like we're saying the same things that we were saying back in kind of like September, October, when really Tapiancoyo kind of took over the whole matchup and started beating Chingalan comfortably. And what that tells me is that they really haven't changed at all. It feels like Chingalan in terms of their game style, or maybe they have tried to implement things, but it just hasn't worked out. And Goyan Tapia have found a solution, but it just feels to me like, for example, Galan getting frustrated, something that we definitely saw towards the end of last year. Chingotto not being able to dominate kind of that cross-court battle between him and Coello, something as well that we saw a lot of obviously towards the end of last year. Those missed opportunities in terms of being able to generate breakpoints but not actually capitalizing on them, I think as well is something that we continuously saw and something that we continuously see about Chingalan. They generate, but they're just not able to take those opportunities. And on the other side of the coin, Goya and Tapia, when they have an opportunity, they take it and they are able to play the important points so well. And Chingalan don't play the important points well against Goya and Tapia. So it just feels to me like this matchup is something that we've seen over and over and over again. And I don't really feel like there's an answer at the moment that Chingalan can bring to the table. And I feel like this is going to get, and you can just see it. You can just see Galán so frustrated. And I'm sure that there's a level of, he's been dominating paddle for 4 or 5 years in a row. Goyan Tapia couldn't touch him. And he's probably thinking to himself, like, what am I doing here? I used to be able to beat these guys comfortably, and now I'm struggling. So to me, honestly, I just, big picture, I just don't think they have the tools at the moment to beat Coello and Tapia. And talking about Chingotto in particular, I completely agree with what you said in terms of generating just more on the first errors than we're used to. Some of them as well from a defensive position, where he's trying to open angles that are just so risky and not necessarily there. And it's not something that he would normally do. And maybe that's out of frustration. Even the match point where they actually lost the match, I mean, Chingotto's trying to open an angle on Tapia that's like really not there and placing the ball, in inches of the court, and he obviously misses it, just hits the glass, and that's game over. So it just feels like they don't really have an answer, and you can't live with Chingotto having a match with a lot of unforced errors because you know that he's not going to generate a ton of winners. So he also can't generate, you want Chingotto to have the type of match where he generates low unforced errors, taking into account that he's probably going to generate a low amount of winners. And something that, for example, just to relate to in another sport, which we always talk about, Hugo, is with football and your goalkeeper, right? You want your goalkeeper, or at least we agree on this, that you'd rather have a goalkeeper that's like stable and doesn't do those silly mistakes and is like gives you confidence and is calm, even though he might not, save those unbelievable one-on-one situations where you're almost close, where it's almost a goal. But you know that he's stable and he's not gonna commit those silly mistakes, right? I think with Chingotto, you'd rather have at least him not necessarily taking too many risks, but just playing his game of not generating a lot of unforced errors and being really safe, and then allowing or trying to, Galán to generate his unfirst or generate more risky shots, because you know that Chingotto is just not doesn't have the capacity to generate so many winners. So also don't bring that level of unforced errors. And it felt like at times he was trying to do a little bit too much, and that I think ultimately cost them.
100%. And actually, funnily enough, I feel like Chingotto's current situation is quite similar to what Dineno has lived as a player throughout recent months. It's that kind of forehand player, more of a traditional forehand player, just normally very safe, very few unforced errors, keep the ball in play, kind of generate spaces for your partner, but don't necessarily generate a lot of winners. And that actually has taken, I'd say, both of them right to the peak of their games, right? Chingotto to fighting for the number one spot last season alongside Galán, and Dineno fighting for the number one spot against COELLO Tapia as well, but when he was playing with Stupa. And then I don't know whether you remember, but Dineno back in the day said, "Hey, I've got to look for new solutions. I need to be more aggressive because this is not enabling me to win matches," or that's what he felt. This was not good enough to actually challenge Goyam for the number one spot. And what actually happened is they came back from pre-season in January and started off really badly, and that new game style wasn't working, and he ended up splitting with Stupa after a couple of months. So I sometimes feel, and this is coming from a fan's perspective, and they probably know much more than I do, but I sometimes feel that players try to do a bit too much kind of beyond what their comfort zone is and try to go too far beyond their comfort zone to try new things when current things are already working. I mean, when you think about it, when Chingalan were beating Coello and Tapia, it wasn't that Chingotto was generating loads and loads of winners. Yes, he was generating a few more than in the final in Qatar a couple of days ago and maybe towards the start of this season and end of last season, but it was more just consistency, limited unforced errors, and making the most of his weapons. And I feel like now, because he's trying to do more than that, it's actually hindering him. Now, this may change. I mean, it's probably a process where you've got to take a step back to go two steps forward. But I just have that feeling with Chingotto. And then my other concern about their partnership, as you said, I mean, it sounds harsh to say this because they've just come off the back of winning the last two tournaments, obviously in Miami and Chile, but they didn't face Coello and Tapia. So same story as last season, lose again. And I saw a stat yesterday about the number of consecutive finals that Coello and Tapia have beaten Chingalan. And it's something like 10. I couldn't believe it. I mean, in finals, they just always beat Chingalan, which is obviously a big point of concern because at the end of the day, if you're not winning trophies, you're never going to challenge for the number one spot, particularly with Goyan Tapia being so dominant. And just one final point on Galán and the pair. I just feel like the only way that they close points is Galán trying to go for a very risky shot. It doesn't feel like they're closing points with, okay, a couple of good volleys, they generate the space, and then the opponents play an average ball and it's a relatively easy winner. no, it's like they're trying to go for smashes that are too far back on the court or volleys that are way too aggressive. And I just feel like, once again, this is coming from a place where they're trying to find new solutions because obviously Goya and Tapia are untouchable, which I understand. But I think this is actually playing against them.
No, 100%. It almost feels like Galán has to kind of wear the superhero kind of cape and be at the level that he was last year, which we both kind of thought was unsustainable because it was just unreal. And that's the only way that they can beat, Koya and Tapia. And Chingalan, as you say, it feels like, or Chingotto, sorry, it feels like he has to take two steps back to, go one step forward, which is normally in the case in these things when you're investing, in kind of your own game and developing new shots and all of that, you have to kind of step outside your comfort zone. But the question for me is then, does Galan want to wait for that? Does he want to wait for Chingotto to get to that stage where he can then offer this side of the game? Does he have enough patience for it? And in today's day and age and today's game, I'm just not sure because you've got also other, very attractive options in the forehand side that let's say are have that package and that attacking capability that Chingotto doesn't have right now. And it just feels like also with kind of what we've seen this season, the partnerships that create Goyen Tapia most trouble are those partnerships that are just being able, like offensively, can generate a lot. I feel like if you're trying to play a game where you're trying to dominate Korean Tapia in, playing more precise and playing and being better in terms of controlling the tempo of the game and that it just doesn't work because they're able to stamp their authority and their game style so quickly because you can't move them off the net, right? Once they're in the net, it's so hard to move them because at the volley, they're obviously incredibly aggressive, they're incredibly tough, and if you try and lob them, they're both incredible smashers. So it's just so hard to then try and like establish a rhythm and a game for yourself where you can try and take initiative. And to me, the partnerships that seem to work the most or give them the most trouble right now, I mean, Asburger and Cardona, which are the ones that have obviously beaten them, which are just incredibly, just basically the same as Goya and Tapia, just younger and less experienced than they are and less polished players, but they're the same type of players that Goya and Tapia and then Stupa and LeBron as well. And LeBron, obviously, I feel like has more to his game than I think Chingotto does. And maybe going a bit more into this, which I think kind of relating to what you said for Chingotto, I feel like maybe he doesn't need to develop his game in the sense of him becoming, let's say, a super attacking and an aggressive forehand player, but even within his own reach and obviously capability, which he has loads of, obviously, but just maybe varying, I feel like his shots as well. I think we talked about this a lot, but I just don't see a lot of variance to his game offensively in terms of definitely his overheads. He plays cross court so much to Koya. I'd love to see a bit more like down the line to Tapia. I feel like the speed of his balls as well. He's got the classic just smash Bibora to Koya really fast, but I'd love to see more down the middle slow. I love to see a bit more gancho to the fence. It just feels to me like he doesn't have or add a lot of variety to his game, which I think obviously helps Koyo and Tapia because it's a more predictable game. And Koyo now clearly has worked out how to play against Chingotto and he's got that cross court kind of matchup won. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Chingotto has to all of a sudden, smash por tres every single ball. But if he's able to just, I think, within his own game, just a little bit more, vary the balls a little bit more, potentially it could give them at least some sort of edge or open up other spaces for the court, maybe for Galán to take over the point. But at the moment, I just don't see a lot of variety in his game offensively. I don't know what you think about that, Hugo.
No, I totally agree. And actually, during the game, I saw Chingotto play that parallel bandeja very few times. So down Tapia's side, down on his backhand. And they were all quite effective. It felt like Tapia was struggling to play those balls because Chingotto was playing at good speed, a lot of spin. So they almost die in that corner. And Tapia was struggling. So I didn't really understand why he wasn't doing that more. But I mean, to be honest, I genuinely feel that when you look at the match, I was looking at the first set statistics, and actually their winners across both pairs were very even. It's just that Koya and Dabia had about 10, 12 fewer unforced errors. So I think that's really what Chingalan have to work on, is cutting their unforced errors down. And when you think about Chingotto, he's one of the best players in the world at that. So it's not something that I think he has to kind of add to his game. It's something that he has in his locker. So I think what they need is potentially to work on, maybe Galán actually has to work on that and say, hey, I've got to be a bit more patient because I mean, first he's an athlete, so him and Chingotto are incredibly fit, so they can take matches to, you know, they can make them very long and they can feel comfortable in them. But you could even argue that as a pair, they could be even fitter than Tapia and Coello. So maybe longer matches could even benefit them. But it feels like they're trying to close points too quickly, which means that their unforced error count is too high at the moment to really compete against Coello and Tapia. As I say, they're generating the same amount of winners with too many more unforced errors. So maybe that's an angle. Maybe it's, hey, Galán, be more patient. Let's work the point a bit more. I mean, as I say, this is coming from our perspective, and I'm sure they're thinking about this way more. I mean, many more solutions, and they know much more about us than well, sorry, about that their encounter and their game generally. But
100%.
I mean, watching it from the outside, that's what it feels like.
No, 100%. And it feels like on Galan's side, there's just that level of frustration that we've seen linger over the kind of end of last year. And as you say, he's probably in a state of mind where he thinks like, okay, I need to finish the point, even if the ball is not necessarily the best ball to finish the point with. He probably is like, I'd rather take this risk and obviously have confidence in his ability to finish off the point. But in many situations that probably might not be the best case, and it might be worth more kind of developing the point a bit more. And I saw sometimes as well, I mean, the thing is Goy and Tapia I think have like a very easy out or kind of easy way to gain the initiative, which is obviously lob Chingotto. And you saw so many times Galan kind of trying to step in but then doesn't really step in. And yeah, probably that kind of boils down as well to that gets him a bit frustrating because he's maybe in a way being frozen out, or at least when Goy and Tapia want to get the initiative. So yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting to see how it develops because I don't know. I mean the solutions at the moment it feels like they're very limited. At least on my side, I mean, it just feels like we're seeing the story over and over again, and it hasn't really changed at all. And I'm not sure if both players are going to have the patience. I mean, especially Galan, to continue with this much longer.
I agree, and I think the next few tournaments are going to be key because at the end of the day, we know that there's a big break throughout the summer. I think it's August, if I'm not mistaken, July, August, and a lot of pairs use that as an opportunity to seek, well, to be honest, seek other partners. And again, it seems so hard. Chingalan have won 2 out of 4 tournaments this season, not including the one where most of the top players didn't play. But same issues as last season, and also the points gap is getting bigger and bigger because actually, even though they've won the same amount of tournaments as Goyan Tapia have this season, Goyan Tapia have won the 2 majors so far. Those are twice as many points as the tournaments that Chingalan have won because they were P1s, obviously, in Miami and in Chile. So again, that's worrying. I mean, I think being honest, from a points perspective, Chingotto's still a very attractive partner for Alan as well. I'm going beyond yeah, actual playing level. There's not that many other players that have the amount of points that Chingotto has. So it would be a risk for Alan to look elsewhere mid-season. But hey, I mean, if the next few tournaments don't go positively, I'm sure he will be thinking about it, whether it's not, I mean, whether it's for the summer or whether it's for 2026. Because if between now and the summer, obviously 3, 4 months left, maybe a bit less, if things don't change and the points gap is the same or even gets bigger, you know that once again, the number one spot has stayed with Boyan Tapia. And I'm sure Alan will be gagging to change that situation. Also, because as we've said, I mean, he is probably as good as Goya and Dabia are individually. It's just that he hasn't found a partner that probably matches his level at least as much as is needed to actually compete for the number one spot.
No, 100%. And I mean, if things don't work, you kind of have to change something, right? And if you're just trying and trying and trying and you're seeing the exact same result, is something needs to give, right? And I think at that point, Galan would probably be thinking about a move. And to be honest, in my personal opinion, I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of the season when we did our predictions, I put Chingalan as as they were going to split. I'm not sure if I said the first pair or not. Maybe I did.
Thank you.
Was wrong about I was wrong about that. Honestly, I think that before the summer they will, or at least in the summer break, they will split because I just really don't see this changing at all. And Galán, to be honest, I think he can pair up with basically anyone and at least be two or third or three seed, which that's probably good enough at least for the beginning. That's kind of how he started with Chingotto as well. And I just don't think they have the weapons to beat Coello and Tapia consistently. And I think Galán is probably at a point in his career where he wants to have results really quickly. And as you mentioned, he's on the level, I would say, with Coello and Tapia. So yeah, I mean that's my thought, just throwing it out there.
Bold.
But yeah, I think
I was saying it's a bold, prediction.
yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I don't venture to say who he will partner with. I'll leave that out there, maybe in some other episode. But yeah, I think in my opinion, we've seen the peak of Chingalan already.
I agree. I totally agree. My only concern, or my only kind of playing devil's advocate, is what I said. For Galán to split, he has to find a partner that's got a good amount of points, and that he actually thinks he can challenge a partner with that person, that player, and challenge Goya Tabia. And there's not that many out there, let's be honest. I mean, obviously, the one that comes to mind is Lebron. I highly doubt that that's actually going to happen. Beyond that, there's not that many others. But hey, maybe it's food for thought, and maybe we can leave that for our viewers and listeners. I mean, we've spoken about this so many times, but I mean, a few names coming to my mind, obviously Yanguas, and to be honest, even Pablo Cardona. I mean, a lot of the top players have said that Cardona could be the one to, well, if he paired up with Galán, he could actually challenge their dominance because it would be a very like for like, four big hitters generating a lot of winners. And I mean, I've always been a bit of bit hesitant with Cardona. I always felt that he was not going to live up to expectations and people were beefing him up a bit too much. And I have to say, I think I've got to eat my words because this season he's really performing. And I'd actually say that the quarterfinals encounter between Osborne and Cardona and Tapia Coello was more even than the final.
Yeah, they're giving them a lot of trouble. And also, I think Tapia mentioned, when he was speaking about the fact that he has the injury, he did say that in Chile, actually, he was 100% and he was feeling completely fine. And that's obviously when Ausburger and Cardona beat them soundly. So, I mean, that's just, I think, shows you the level that both of them were playing at.
Agreed.
But yeah, maybe moving on, we maybe just want to quickly mention as well, kind of some high level, some other performances that I thought were noticeable on the tournament. I mean, just a quick mention on maybe the partnerships that are ending. So a bit of a disappointment on both partnerships that are ending, at least the main one. So Dineno and Garrido, who had the chance, they were the fourth seeded pair the first time because Stupan Lebron did not end up participating, and they had a great chance. Obviously, the first time being a fourth seed, that until the semifinals, they don't have to face one of the other, Chingalan or Coello Tapia, but they didn't make the semifinals, and they actually lost to Paquito and Vera, who the first time that they make the semifinals, so good for them, but a bit of a disappointment ending, I think, for the Nenan Garrido, and then obviously Juan Tello and Livac as well, very disappointing ending for them because they lost it in the first round. And that's obviously for a pair that had been playing out so well. It's a bit of a kind of tough ending and leaves a bit of a bad or sour taste, in your mouth. So yeah, we'll see how that kind of affects. Do you believe that that's down to purely, let's just say, you don't care anymore, you're not going to be with this partner? Or do you think that there's like a level extra to it where actually, these players, let's say, for example, Garrido and Dineno just haven't been performing that well, and maybe that's a sign of things to continue throughout the season?
Good question. I do think it's a bit of both. I think both Dineno and Garrido have not been performing to their standards this season. And when you look at their partnership on paper, as we've discussed many a times, it looks perfect. It just seems like they work very well. And actually, when Galán was interviewed at the start of the season, which pairs do you think are going to do really well? He focused on Dineno and Garrido and he said big expectations for them. So it made a lot of sense on paper, but they just haven't performed well as a pair and individually. But I do think that actually the bigger kind of picture and the bigger reason is just their energy seems so off across both pairs. So I'm talking about Garrido and Dineno. and also Liwak Antello. And it felt that particularly the players who've been kind of let go or let down, so I'm talking about Garrido and Liwak, just seemed like they were so off. Like when things weren't going their way, they were just kind of saying, "Hey, you know what? Last tournament with him, does it actually really matter?" I mean, it clearly does from a points perspective, reputation perspective, etc. But I think that it's easy to get in your own head when you've just kind of been let go by a partner to probably not try as hard, or when things don't go positively, just not put 110% into the match.
No, 100%. I mean, it feels like, I mean, you could see their energy, right? It just wasn't there, and they were probably thinking about other things and their next partnerships and stuff. So a bit of a shame because I always thought, to be honest, that these kind of end of partnerships, you should go out with a bang because it almost feels like you're playing carefree, if you see what I mean. Because you're like, might as well just have fun out here rather than like taking it so seriously. And that I think sometimes you can associate that to being able to play freely and confident, and that obviously has a positive impact on your game. But I mean, it wasn't the case for Garrido and Dineno and Dejan Livak, and as you said, probably more, even more to the players that actually kind of were dumped, if you see what I mean.
No, I think definitely it seemed like that. And I do agree with what you say in terms of fairy tale endings. I mean, we saw Paquito and Chingotto win that master final when they said they were going to split. And we've seen it many other times. I mean, even Galán Lebron putting in a great performance in the master final. And actually, when they were rumored to be splitting, saying, actually, we're going to stick together after a good end of the season when Lebron recovered from his injury. So I think it does happen. But I think it's slightly different when you haven't, or when players might feel that they haven't really been given a proper go. I mean, it's only been what, four tournaments really, and your partner said, "Hey, I want to call it quits" after a whole preseason together. That must be really tough mentally. So, I mean, I can't really blame them. I do understand it.
No, yeah, I mean, and we saw how, for example, to Garrido last year, his split with Young was affected him. So it's obviously something that, even though you always hear when players get asked about these splits, they're like, "No, I get it, it's completely fine." I mean, at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And if you're with a partner and you invest in a project, you invest time, resources, everything, and your partner comes and says like, "Hey, it's a breakup effectively, right?" And obviously, you can't say that it doesn't hurt. Like, obviously, it does hurt at the end of the day.
Agreed. Totally agree.
But yeah, maybe, I mean, Hugo, I think it's been a great episode as always, and I don't want to take any more of your precious time. Obviously, you're on holiday, and I hope that you do go out, at least today, have a bit of fun, and get a bit of a tan, even though it seems like you're already quite tanned, which I'm very jealous of.
That's the
But
light. I'm definitely not tan, mate. It's the light.
But yeah, I mean, I do hope that everyone has enjoyed this episode as always. Please do leave a like and a comment with your thoughts on the kind of tournament itself. But yeah, stay tuned this week. We've got the Brussels P2. Make sure to watch it because then we've got quite a big break actually, about a month's time until the next tournament in Asunción, the 18th of May, if I'm not mistaken. So almost a month. So yeah, I do hope that everyone has enjoyed, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers, guys. Pleasure, guys.